Hello, everybody. This is our first live stream, and let me pull up all my stuff. This is the first live stream for our channel, and I want to talk today about how to use the Notes tool and the Sermon Builder in conjunction together with one another. So, this video is aimed for people who may be new to Logos Bible software, and you feel overwhelmed with the tools. You feel you really kind of want to make the switch to doing your research within Logos. Maybe you've had other systems in place. I want to show you how the Notes tool, at least how I use it. The beautiful thing about this software is that really anybody, you can set up a system that you like. So just watch this if you're interested in this sort of thing, and you could even use this for taking notes within Logos. But for regular Bible study, but you really got to find a system that works for you. And so some of my colors that I use for my notes are arbitrary. I keep things very simple. With Logos, you can get very complex, but I like to keep it simple. And so I've just got a couple colors that I use for anchors and visual filters. So let's just get into it. All right, so I'm going to open up a Bible, and as you can see, I've got some visual filters here in terms of notes. So I've got this circle with a X in it, and when I've got that, that means that's a sermon outline. I'll show you how to open that and use those. But anytime I've got a circle with an X in it, I know that it's going to be a sermon outline for me. In fact, I keep a notebook called This Week's Sermon, and within there is where I store all the notes for the upcoming preaching sermon or lesson. I'm not a vocational preacher anymore. I preach. I've spoken over the last couple of years, or the last year, 2 or 3 times, but I'm not doing it weekly. I do far more teaching within Sunday school for our church, but I'm always going to have a note with this X in a circle because I'm going to come down here. I've got a note called Sermon Outline. It's a folder called Sermon Outlines and Series Ideas. And within that, I keep all of my outlines that I've made for a sermon. I'm going to write the sermon in either Sermon Builder, or you might use Word or another word processor. But I'm always have an outline at the ready within one of these notes. And the beautiful thing about them is you can anchor them to a text. So you can always click on Add Anchor and anchor, whatever, just type your passage in. And then that visual filter, because I have this X in the yellow circle, so I chose the yellow color in this yellow circle, the X. That's the only thing that I use that formula for an icon within a note. It's going to show up within that text. So look, it says Luke 12:49, 13 through 13:35. I've got that icon. It shows up in my Bible as a yellow circle with an X. So anytime I'm in listening to our pastor preach, or I'm in a class and we go to that text, I'm going to see whether it's on my mobile device or when I'm doing research here at my computer that I've got an X with a circle. I can click on that and it's going to open up that note for me and that notebook. So I always keep, that's the first thing. I always have a notebook called This Week's Sermon, even if it's not about this week's sermon, or I'm not even teaching that week, but I'm preparing for a future study. And I've got it anchored to the text. I usually have the text at the top of the note, and so I'm able to click on that in my Bible, and when I open that note, it'll open up my preferred Bible and go straight to it. And then within this week's sermon folder, I've got all these other different notes, and as you can see, the outline one is an X with a yellow circle. This is just a green square. My system for icons is not that complicated. It's pretty simple because I would forget it. So if it's yellow, that means it's my information. Even though within this note, I'm going to have other people's information. So right here, this outline, this is for a Sunday school class coming up. We're using Grant Osborne's Luke commentary. And this is his division, his outline of this passage. So I need to type that in there. That this is coming from Grant Osborne. This is not my outline yet. This is just an outline for the text. But if it's yellow, it's me. So these are things that I'm thinking about the text. These are things that I've said about the text. There, I've got a quote because I'm pretty sure I'm going to want to really take that theme seriously as I put together my sermon. But these ones that have the green, anytime for me that I see a green icon, I know that it's not my work. It is someone else's work. And so if it's yellow, it's mine. Which probably subconsciously means slow down. Really think about whether you're going to use this or not. If it's green, it means go ahead. That's someone else's work. A scholar, someone who's really spent their life giving devotion to that subject. And as you can see in my Bible, I've got these green different icons, and that let me know that those are other people's work. So what I'm doing when I'm doing sermon prep is not only am I taking notes for the sermon, but I've got all these different different texts anchored to a verse, like these different passages from commentaries or books. I've got it anchored to a text because what I'm doing is over the years I've been creating essentially a study Bible with my notes, but also the notes of commentators and theologians and preachers. And when I'm putting a sermon together, I'm not just putting the sermon together. I'm also making notes that go into the Bible for later use. So in this folder, this week's sermon, I've got my note, and this is where I throw all my thoughts into. We'll come back to this in just a second. And I'm also creating notes that deal with the text. And my colors are this. Yellow, it's mine. Green means it is someone else's, a commentator. If it's a red note, that is a word study. So I'm going to highlight the word or the verse, or put a note on that verse with a red, and then it's going to have a word study within that text. And then if it's blue, like a dark blue, then I know that's an illustration or a quote for a sermon. So those are the only 4 colors that I use: yellow, green, red, and dark blue. And that's it. And yellow's mine, green is someone else's, red is a word study, and dark blue is quote or illustration. And then I'm putting those things within the text as we go. So I've just started working on this within the last couple days, and so I don't have a whole lot of notes yet. But this is going to be my main one. This one at the top with the X and the circle. I've got this. This is where I will eventually develop my outline. And I've got several things that go into this note. First, I want you to see that, as an aside, this 2 arrows up here at the top, when you click on it, it's going to open it up to a half page, which I find so much better to work in when I am looking at the text. But I've got it anchored to the text that I'm in. So Luke 12:49 through 13:35. That's going to be the text I'm teaching out. I think in sometime maybe September 10th is when this is. And then I've got a section up here called Further Study. So when I am reading through the text, and questions come to mind of what are things that I want to just study more. What are and I've just started this process within the last day, and I've got several weeks to get this ready. But if I'm coming across words that I think are interesting, or thoughts that I want to revisit, so like I've got this Greek word in 52 through 53 where Jesus says it's going to be divided. I want to what does that word divided mean? Is that just like a happy thing? Is that an angry thing? Jesus' tone is pretty serious in this passage, but what does it mean to be divided? And how do the other New Testament authors use it, if they do? So that's just one thing I want to study. I also want to study in 13:1. We get the idea that these Galileans have been killed by Pilate. Why are they killed? And then it also made me think I need to refresh myself on who they are. So kind of get the context of Galilee and who the Galileans are. So that's one question I've got. Another one I had is why does Jesus talk about the 3 pecks of flour in 13:21? I am not. When he gives this parable, it is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 pecks of flour until it was all leaven. I'm not familiar with peck. I don't know how much that is. So that was one thing right off the bat. What is it about the pecks? A flour, I did a little research, and the pecks of flour are large amounts. So I'm going to continue to think through the implications of that. Another question I had in 1322 is they're proceeding on his way to Jerusalem. Luke seems to be picking up on the narrative for going to the cross. And so I'm wanting to see kind of the theme of that through the rest of the book of Luke. And I even did a word study here, Jerusalem in Luke 12 through 24. So I did a Bible search for Luke 12 through 24, and I know I'm going fast if you're not used to this, so feel free to slow this down or watch it again. But I wanted to see every time that Jerusalem was mentioned in Luke 12 through 24 through the rest of the chapter, and in particular, how often does Luke talk about them going that way, like where the narrative is just moving forward to Jerusalem. And one thing I noticed off the bat when I looked at this list yesterday was a lot of it is that they're going on his way to Jerusalem. They're headed to Jerusalem. Jesus just weeping over Jerusalem, wept over the city. And then we get down to here at the end in Luke 24:52, road to Emmaus, and they, after worshiping him, returned to Jerusalem with great joy. So I don't know if I'm going to do anything with that, but I'm going to think through that even further, that Jesus is upset in Jerusalem. They're headed to Jerusalem. The passion happens in Jerusalem. The crucifixion happens in Jerusalem. All the things happen in Jerusalem. It's horrible. And then the resurrection happens, and these sad individuals return back to Jerusalem with great joy. So I think I don't know. I'm going to keep searching what other people have said about that. So, but anything that as I'm reading the text that come further study, I'm going to have this section that just says further study. And these are the things that I want to think through when it comes to the text. And then down here, I'm beginning to form an outline. So I've just started this, and as you can see, this outline here, Division of Rules of Kingdom Preaching, so be alert, that is Grant Osborne's section instead of mine. But I think it's a pretty helpful one. But right now what I'm doing is I'm taking that first section and I'm studying that. So 49 through 59. And when you preach, you're probably not preaching or teaching this large of a section. My preference is not to do this large because there's too much and I've only got 45 minutes. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to do a deep dive and then make it manageable in a class. And so that's that first one. So I'm looking even within this pericope of 1249 through 59, I'm looking at different sections. So 49 through 53, 54 through 56, 57 through 59, and just saying what is happening within that text. And so I'll be doing that for all four sections within this outline. I'm not even done with the 1249 through 59 yet, but I'm going to do a deep dive into that section, and then I'll be looking at 1 through 19 of chapter 13, and then 13, 10 through 7, and doing the same thing. I'm going to be adding what further study do I need to do in this text, and then what these sort of sections, I'm going to be searching commentaries. I use my passage guide a lot. And the thing I love about the passage guide is you can customize it, but you can also just put your verse in and go to town. It brings all the stuff straight to you. So I use that a lot. I also, beyond a passage guide, I use my search panel probably the most. I think that's one of the most invaluable tools, especially within this book section. So, for instance, I've got a tag for this Luke class called Luke class, maybe? There it is, my tag, Luke class. So, and I'm able to search within those verses. So, like, I could even do Jerusalem in, I'm going to do a milestone search of Bible, and we will do Luke 12. We'll see if anything comes up. And sure enough, so the search that I just did is I want to see if any of the authors in the collection I have on the books that I'm using for the Luke class, do they talk about Jerusalem in in this milestone. And a milestone means basically not headings, but if there is a section about Luke 12, so it's not that Luke 12 is in the section, but if that section within that book is about Luke 12, I want to see who talks about Jerusalem within then. And this author does this commentary. And so, yeah. So I just love Logos because you're able to do searches like that and always be researching. So we can talk about those kind of searches. She's mowing the grass. All right, go back out there. So that's my 4-year-old Isabel. So after I've got all the things searched within this text, I'm going to begin building my sermon. And you can use any software that you like, or like Word, or if you've got a word processor you like, Google Docs. I like to keep everything in Logos. And so what I'm going to do is I will have my sermon ready. So I've already had my sermon in my sermon manager built, but the reason I like to use the notes in the sermon builder is because over here on the right hand side, I'm going to be able to open up this week's sermon, and all those notes, we're going to open that up. Oh, I don't want to insert that. But all those notes, I want to actually open. There we go. Use the one on the right to open it. But I like to have all my notes right here within my sermon panel, so that I can delete all that because I don't want to use all that. There we go. But I like to have all my notes here as that I can scroll down. I'm going to put quotes and illustrations in there, and I might have to open up the sermon tool, the note tool, excuse me, open up the note tool to see what's going on, but it's all right there. And once I've got a note that I like or a quote that I like, I love having it here because I'm just, instead of copy and paste, I'm going to just insert, and it's going to insert it right there into the sermon. It's very cool. So that's how I use the note tool and the sermon builder in conjunction, and I write my sermon here. The big tools that I use for sermon prep beyond just the note tool and the sermon builder, I use a custom passage guide a lot. And let me go into, I've got one set up here. I've got two different ones set up. I've got a slimmed down sermon guide. So if I do Luke 12:49 through say 59, this does not have all the things within the standard sermon guide. So this is really slimmed down. I've got my content at the top, and that's also why I like to have my sermons in Logos, because it's going to bring that information straight to that section. But I've got these different sections. It's not as deep of a dive in the different sections, but it uses the things that I used a lot. And I've got more time than I used to study and prepare. So I use a lot more of the tools than I used to. But if you're doing preaching prep and you're having to do that once or twice or 3 times a week, you know you don't have a lot of time to really go. You just don't have as much time. So I use this slimmed down sermon guide. I also use the, let me go back to my guides. I've got a regular passage guide, and this has just pretty much all the things with some custom collections that I use. And if I want to go take it even further, I use that passage guide. The other thing I use, as I said, is the search panel, and I use this all the time. I use collections and tags to search through collections and tag resources. That lets you take your library from a reading library to a research library. And what I mean by that is I've got 16,000 books in my library. I don't have time to read. I don't want to read all of them. But when you're able to search through like Bible, search words with Bible passages or in the milestones, and you're able to make your library smaller, not meaning you get rid of books, but it means that you get the books that you need, whether it's theology books or commentaries. You're able to get those collections of books and then search within those collections, and you get the information that you need that's pertinent to your searching. So I encourage everybody to learn how to do search, and we can make some videos on that. But I use this search panel for the books all the time. and it really helps me to study the text. So we've been going on about 20 minutes on sermon prep, and I hope that was helpful. Again, if you're needing information about sermon prep, don't hesitate to leave a comment on one of the videos. I'm going to do better at searching those and seeing those and opening up the dashboard of my channel more to hopefully get you all information on sermon prep. So if you found this video helpful, like it, and if you didn't, that's okay. And even if you didn't, you want to like it, that's an okay thing too. But I appreciate y'all, and I look forward to studying God's Word and using Logos Bible more. I hope this was helpful. Thanks. Bye.